Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Cooking Without Looking TV show. I am your host, Alan Preston. My co-host, Annette Watkins, is out this time around, so we've got our guest co-host, a longtime friend of our TV show, Sylvia Stinson Perez. Welcome, Sylvia.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you again.
It's good to have you back too, Sylvia. Today, our guest chef is here to help us tackle one of life's culinary challenges. I agree with you too. Preparing the perfect chicken breast. Sylvia, is this a culinary challenge for you too?
You know, I am going to have to admit that although I cook a lot and I think I'm a great cook, preparing chicken is one of those things that I think is a challenge for me because you have to get chicken right, or it could be a health hazard. So yeah, it is.
You're absolutely right. It's got to be cooked enough to be fully cooked so it's not a health hazard. And yet, if you cook it too much, it gets all dry and, I don't know, funny. The texture gets funny to it. So getting it just right is tough. Anyway, I'm sorry, Sylvia. Just a reminder to our audience that everyone in our Cooking Without Looking TV show are blind or visually impaired. So Sylvia, let's get this Cooking Without Looking show on the road.
Okay, I am super excited because today the Cooking Without Looking TV show welcomes Micah Ranquist. And Micah is from Vermont. So it's probably cool up there, Micah.
It is. It is. Hi, Alan. Yeah.
Hi, Micah.
Yes, it is cold. I think it's 27 today.
Wow.
I suppose you don't want to know that it's give or take 85. Oh, wait a minute. I've got my indoor-outdoor thermometer. For those of you, if you can see my face, you can see this too. I think it said 81 on there, doesn't it?
That's just you're just trying to make people envious, Alan.
It is gorgeous down here today.
So Micah, it's going to be important for you to make something warm and cozy for all those who live in the Northeast and not Florida. So tell us, before we get started with what you're going to make with the chicken, tell us a little bit about your vision loss journey, Micah.
Sure. So actually, I don't envy any of you. I grew up in Florida. There's a reason I live here. I like this much better. So I was born with a visual impairment. My mother figured it out when I was probably about 2. Fast forward a couple of decades, I didn't get a diagnosis for retinitis pigmentosa until I was 26. But my mother figured out something was wrong when I was little, and she first started taking me to pediatricians, and a lot of them just would say that I'm attention seeking. There was nothing wrong with my eyes, just I needed to have different parenting or seek mental health counseling or something. My mother wasn't having it. Eventually she found an ophthalmologist who'd been raised in China, who was willing to try to evaluate me, and he did, and figured out that I was, myopic at the time. It's nearsighted. And then over the years, I had different variations of the myopia diagnosis. I had one doctor just kind of make something up and said I had severe degenerative myopia, which is not even a thing, but it sounded good. So we just kind of went with it. And then, of course, as is the case with many young people, kids are cruel. I was in regular public school, and school was hard, even though, my vision was correctable to close to normal until I was about 8. I learned to read as a sighted kid. Still school was pretty hard. And then I eventually went to Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind and kind of started figuring myself out, kind of gained my own version of confidence and it's just been degenerating, my whole life. That's what RP does. At this point, I think the official designation on the vision report says can recognize movement at 18 inches or something like that. So I don't really see very much. Lights and shapes, some colors, that's about it. And I've been one of those people my whole life. My parents raised me to be one of those where you can't just say you can't do something just because you have some kind of difference. In my case, a vision impairment. They always made me prove to myself that I couldn't do something, and that's part of how I ended up cooking. I wanted to learn how to cook after high school, and I just decided I'm gonna give it a try, and hopefully I'll be able to do it. And then here I am. I can cook.
Awesome. I have to tell you, as I'm listening to your story, there are so many similarities. I too have a diagnosis of RP, that I was visually impaired, actually legally blind all of my life, and didn't get that diagnosis until my mid-20s. And they're still like not steady with that diagnosis for me. And yeah, and I see just lights and sometimes shadows. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that's the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind has a beautiful campus in St. Augustine, Florida, that I've been to. So, well, you have your own business, Micah. So tell us a little bit about that. In addition to your love for cooking and all of that, you have a business.
Sure. Yeah, I'm an orthopedic massage therapist. So some people would call it medical massage. Some people call it orthopedic massage. I work collaboratively with chiropractors, physical therapists, sometimes orthopedic surgeons, to help people get out of pain. Essentially, it's not simply relaxation work, as might be the case with some modalities. I'm really consider myself to be in pain management.
That's awesome. I love that. And I actually hadn't heard of that type of massage therapy. So that's very cool. Thank you. Well, your friends and family love to watch you cook. I bet they also love to eat what you cook. And so I bet we're going to enjoy watching and hearing about your cooking, and at the end, wishing we could taste it. So we're ready to hear your secret tips. Take it away.
All right. So today I'm going to do, I hesitate to call it something Mexican because, or, Hispanic influenced, because that's not necessarily true. Just because it's in a tortilla doesn't necessarily make it Mexican. We're going to be making a handmade tortilla, perfectly roasted chicken breast, and a very sciencey kind of cheese sauce with some seared vegetables and then a separate fresh vegetable topping. So step one would be have everything in your place. It's called mise en place. For those who can't see, I've got a kitchen island in front of me, and my stove is off to my left. And then behind me to my left is more counter space that I just have some other things kind of ready to go. I did some prep stuff beforehand. And then another part of being prepared for something or getting ready to do stuff is kind of thinking about how to use your time efficiently. So I've set up a routine of what I'm going to go through today so that this doesn't end up taking 2 or 3 hours. Should only take about 35 or 40 minutes. And the start of that is with starting the process of making our tortillas. I've got a bowl that I already prepared here with some masa in it. That's the kind of flour you use for making tortillas. This is a corn flour, and it's got a little bit of salt in it, probably about half a teaspoon for half a cup of masa. And then we're going to be using some very hot water to hydrate that. I'm using my my K-cup coffee machine for the very hot water because it's just kind of instant hot water. That makes it kind of way easier to do.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. Just one minute here.
I gotta tell you, Micah, when I've tried to make homemade tortillas before, they were shaped really, really strangely. So I can't wait to hear how you get round tortillas.
We're gonna call them usually round-ish.
I love it. Might have
Only
been
way I get
anything but
round ones is to
roundish.
buy them at the store.
They're not the same. Nothing beats a homemade tortilla.
You're absolutely right. But the store-bought ones are round.
That's the truth, they are round. Okay. So what I've got going in my bowl here is half a cup of very hot water, half a cup of masa flour, and about a half a teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just letting the rest of this hot water coming out of the K-Cup machine fall into a bowl with my little honey bear dispenser thing to make sure that when I'm ready to use the honey for this fresh vegetable topping, that the honey comes out of the little bottle very, very easily. I don't have to wonder how much I'm getting out because it'll be nice and heated right out like as thin as milk. It'll be easy to measure.
Mm.
Good idea.
Okay. Now
Micah,
that-
do you still have some eyesight left?
What's that?
Do you still have a little bit of eyesight?
Not well, yes, some. Like in this current orientation, like I can tell that the sun is still out when I look at my windows. I can see that these lights are on, and in my peripheral vision, I can tell that my counter is darker than my stove, but not really much more than that.
Okay, all right. Helps
And
with
it's-
orientation though. And I like the idea you got a lot of counter space around you. I like that too for prep work.
Yeah, counter space is good. Actually, part of the reason I got this island is for that exact thing, because of having plenty of space for prep work. So with this masa that I'm hydrating, I've just got a fork here, and it's just in one of those basic disposable, although I reuse them all the time, like a Gladware kind of bowl. And I'm just using the fork to get it all well mixed up. And then literally, I'm just gonna set it aside and let it finish hydrating while I move on and do other stuff. It's fairly warm to touch it. You wouldn't want to try to like do all the work for it just now. A little bit too warm for that, although I do have kind of chef's hand, so I can handle it. But it's not so hot that it's just gonna melt the bowl or anything like that. Okay, next step, we get the chicken breast in the oven. When I was talking with Renee a couple of weeks ago about making this perfect chicken breast, one of the things that I had highlighted was that making almost anything, but especially a chicken breast, it's really paramount that you have your oven fully preheated. And by that, I mean 350 degrees. And I let it go well beyond when the little indicator says that it's fully preheated, because I just want to be sure that there are no cold spots whatsoever in my oven. And I actually work with a pizza stone in the oven to help with temperature conduction, just makes it much more even. And your end result is, it's much more easy to have a consistent end result when you very fully preheat your oven. So what I've got is a cookie sheet with aluminum foil on it. I just drizzled a little bit of oil on the cookie sheet, and I sprinkled a little bit of salt and then some fresh cracked black pepper. I didn't try to cover the cookie sheet with oil. I just drizzled some in the middle, and then I put the salt and pepper down roughly in the middle as well. I didn't try to orient with my hands to figure out the exact middle. I just kind of went for it. And I learned an interesting thing at the store the other day. I never really would have thought of this. I always think of the meat counter at the store as where you go to get your, your fancy cuts of steak or your big roasts or whatever. And I was at the meat counter, and I just happened to ask the question. I don't even know what inspired me to ask, but it's just, do you happen to sell like just a single boneless, skinless chicken breast anywhere? And he's like, yeah, right here in the case in front of you. And that never crossed my mind. So I got this single boneless, skinless chicken breast at the store yesterday. So I'm taking it out of its wrapping. And when you hold the chicken breast, some people won't like touching meat, but I don't really care. When you hold a chicken breast, it's going to be a very smooth side and one side that's clearly kind of cut. The cut side is where the bone was taken out. So I'm putting the cut side down on the pan. And then I'm going to get rid of my paper. Oh, Renee had to move that. Okay, so get rid of the paper. Wash your hands a little bit, just so you don't get major cross-contamination. You don't have to do like a full soap wash necessarily, because it's very short, and when you've got hot water going, just rinse the stuff off pretty easy. So then we do the same thing that we did right at the beginning, is we're gonna drizzle some oil, and I'm gonna just sort of aim for the middle where I kind of feel like I put the piece of chicken with the oil, and then the exact same thing with both the salt and pepper, except I closed my pepper, not thinking about I have more to do. Pepper. And so a little bit of salt. If you are one that really needs to measure stuff, I would go with probably a 1/4 teaspoon for each side of the chicken breast, something like that. It doesn't have to be precise, because not all of it gets directly on your chicken when you can't see what you're doing anyway. So just kind of shake it a bit. Next step.
So Micah, this is Sylvia, and I'm wondering, like, so I heard your pepper grinder, but for your salt, I don't know which one that was. But do you also ever just put the salt or pepper in your hand and sprinkle it over? That way you can control how much you're getting. Because I know a lot of people like to do that, and I do that a lot.
Yeah, it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm salting an individual dish that's already been made, I'll shake the salt through my fingers so I can feel how much I'm doing. But in this kind of scenario, this exact thing, it's not really quite so important. Because in the end, you can, when you get to the part where you get ready to cut the chicken breast, if there's just way too much salt, you can literally take a paper towel and wipe a bunch of it off. Not really that big of a deal, but yes, sprinkling in the way you described is totally viable too. Okay, so going in the oven.
Mike, I got a quick question for you too about this oil and the chicken down. When you put the oil on the top of the chicken that's already on the oil that's on the aluminum foil, do you move it around a little bit with your fingers to make sure the whole chicken breast is getting coated?
Usually I didn't in this particular case, because I held the oil up high enough that I could hear the difference between it splatting on the chicken and splatting on the aluminum foil.
Okay.
But so that's just another way that you can do it. But yeah, that would be a good idea. But then you'd have to wash your hands again too.
Yeah.
So just kind of thinking about different things.
Well, I wear a pair of jeans and I kind of dry my hands off on the jeans frequently.
Yeah, I have in my apron that I'm wearing an apron that my son gave me. It has something to do with grilling. I don't remember exactly what it says, but he gave it to me for my birthday, and I have a hand towel hanging out of the apron to wipe my hands on. So I just set a timer for the chicken, because it takes exactly 28 minutes. And it's important to consider that sorry, I got distracted. It's important to consider that the idea that I put foil on that pan, because the very last step is once it comes out of the oven, that chicken is going to get wrapped up in that foil nice and tightly for exactly and at least 7 minutes. What that does is that creates a condition where carryover heat is going to take it from about 161 degrees or so to up to at least 165 degrees, which is what the USDA says is safe. for consuming chicken, 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So it'll take it up to that while also not allowing much moisture to escape the whole thing at all, because you've got it very tightly wrapped in the chicken or in the foil. So this is how you make the chicken breast be perfectly cooked and not dried out. So while that's it, we got prep stuff to do. Right now, I am slicing through, making very thin, shreddy slices of some Chinese cabbage that I got at our local farmers market here. When I say thin slices, I'm gonna guess they're about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit less wide than a 1/4 inch. And this is gonna be part of our end topping. And I've got that bowl that I had the honey pot resting in with hot water. I got the bowl that I had the honey pot resting in with the hot water here. And that's what I'm using to put my fresh toppings in. I took the honey pot out. And then, so we're putting in, what did I decide to do for this? Oh, fruit. So I've got a fruit reamer in front of me. My fruit reamer, citrus reamer is one, it's not like an entire device. It's just the reamer part that happens to fit inside of a mason jar, which I think is good because then you got fewer items in your kitchen that only do one single thing. Instead of having this entire bowl that only does one thing, you got just the little fruit reamer part. So now I've got a lemon that I cut in half, and I've got a lime that I cut in half. And then I'm gonna run them both over the fruit reamer. And what we're doing with these two, this lemon and lime, along with some salt and some honey and some cilantro, is we're making a dressing for that fresh topping, the cabbage topping that's gonna go on our not taco thing. That's what we should call it.
Okay, this is sounding delicious.
Yes, it is.
We should call it not taco. And just for time's sake, I'm only gonna do half the lemon and half the lime. Right now, I can do the rest of them later for another application. But I don't need all of that for just this 1/3 of a head of cabbage that I just sliced up. I don't know if that's audible on the camera, but this particular lemon has a lot of juice in it.
I can hear that. Yeah, I hear it dripping down there.
I can't hear the dripping, but I can hear you when you're cutting.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so the fruit
That's
reamer,
scary.
creamer's done with, so it's going into the sink. And we're gonna take about a tablespoon of this lemon juice, lime juice mixture. And so I've got a couple of fruit cups, applesauce cups kind of thing. That always come in the little individually packaged fruit cup things.
Mhm.
I keep those, almost all of them, because they are excellent to use for applications like this, where you don't need an entire bowl in order to mix this tiny bit of dressing. Or like if you're doing a bunch of prep work stuff, maybe you're making a masala. I made a masala for dinner last night. And you've got a bunch of herbs that you're going to be working with, but only little bits of each one. These little gems are great for that, for just because they're so small, you can just put whatever amount of individual herbs you want in, because not all the herbs go into your final dish at the same time. It's food layering. All right,
I love that you're super organized and you do like all this prep work. I think that's so important. You're right. It cuts down on time. It keeps you organized. You know what's going on and when it's going on.
Having a
Yeah.
lot of space to work in and knowing your space, knowing your kitchen is important too.
Exactly. And especially actually sort of a little bit opposite of what you're saying, Alan. If you don't have a lot of space to work with, being organized is even more important.
It
You're
is.
absolutely right.
Okay, so I've got this dressing nearly done. The last part of this fresh taco, not taco topping is to take some fresh cilantro. Got at the store because it's too cold for it to grow here in Vermont right now, so I didn't get it from the farmer's market. So I'm just going to take some of this and I'm just going to give it a rough chop for about how much I probably want for this, which I would say if you were trying to measure this out, it's probably a tablespoon and a half or so. And then the cabbage, all told, is probably a loose cup of Chinese cabbage. Okay, so the cilantro is loosely chopped. I've got my lemon juice, honey, lime juice, dressing. What I didn't say, because we were talking about something, is that instead of putting salt in this as an addition, I used something a little bit different. It's a different type of salt. It's called liquid aminos, and it's an enzymated soybean product. So it kind of tastes a little bit like soy sauce, and it gives this like really incredible savory umami kind of flavor to contrast the sourness of the fruits and the sweetness of the honey. It should make this topping quite yummy. And now I'm just mixing this all up by hand, the cabbage, cilantro, and dressing. And then this is just going to sit off to the side and do its marinating for a little bit. And then
Micah, would you repeat that again? That
the combination?
salt alternative?
Oh, it's called liquid aminos.
Liquid aminos. Thank you.
I've not heard of that.
Yeah. In my store, it's in the salad dressing aisle, kind of close, not close to vinegars, but close to where maybe like your packets of ranch dressing and stuff are, is where I found it. Oh, and this, I've almost forgot, this dressing also needs just a little drizzle of oil. Oh, I didn't describe this. The oil container that I have is just a glass bottle with one of those little skinny pour spout things on it. And it makes it, you don't have to try to, measure out exactly a tablespoon of oil when you're just doing this kind of cooking. If you're baking, obviously you want to measure, but with this, you don't have to measure so precisely. So it's easy to just kind of drizzle a little bit of oil using that drizzle bottle thing, which I can't even think of what the name of that is right now. It's got a name, but I don't know what it is. Okay, so next step, we're gonna prepare some vegetables for searing to go on as the base layer for our not tacos that goes before the chicken. So I've got a little nub of a jalapeno in my hand. I used some of it in something, I don't even know what I used it for, but I got just this nub. It's probably like a little bit bigger than the end of an adult male's thumb. It's just a little nub. And I'm just very thinly slicing this right now, a little bit thinner than the thickness of a quarter. So it's pretty thin. So I just went one direction, got it really thin, and I'll just go the other direction much more coarsely. And then this stuff is going to go into another one of those little fruit cup things that I like to collect. And then we're going to do something similar with some poblano pepper. We'll cut I've got just a chunk of poblano here that's probably 3.5 inches long. Poblanos, typically kind of like 3-inch diameter, something like that. So I cut the end of it off, the stem end, and then I cut down the side of it so that I could open it up like a book and peel the seeds out. I'm not peeling it out because of heat. With the poblano, they're not very hot. I'm peeling them out because I just really want this peppery taste. And this is a pepper that I happen to have instead of like a bell pepper. And also the seeds in this kind of
Micah,
application
would you
where we're just
mind
doing like
moving
a
the
quick
honey
sear.
bottle over?
Yeah.
Because it's blocking your cutting. An audience member has shared.
Okay. I don't need it there anyway. So
Thank
The,
you.
we can move this too. So the poblano, I just don't want it to be bitter from those seeds when I do this searing that I'm going to do. And similar with the jalapeno, I'm just holding this down on the cutting board and I'm cutting it into really thin strips. Maybe not as thin as a quarter this time, maybe a little thicker, closer to the way that I cut the cabbage. And I'm just being careful about what I do. I don't like the technique of cutting with your knuckles at the edge of the knife, because then I can't use my fingertips to figure out what I'm doing. And so I have just taken the time to go very slow over the years and eventually got to where I can do it quickly. But I've taken the time over the years to figure out how to do it without cutting my fingers and not having to have my knuckles be in the way. So now I have.
Micah, you bring up such an important point, because I think people who are new to vision loss, and especially those who've enjoyed cooking and cutting and all those things, sometimes feel frustrated because they feel like they have to work really slow. And your point about it takes time to develop those skills and that confidence is really important. And you gotta start practicing, and even if it's slow at the beginning, you will pick up your confidence and your speed.
I like to use the side of my fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
And I still work very slow, even to this day, because I don't do it often enough.
And there's nothing wrong with working slow.
Yeah, and you know, I'm working fairly slow in what we're doing today, just because, you know, I don't want people to think that they've got to go super fast in order to be able to do this well, or to be able to do it like I do it or whatever. So normally I would have this all done a couple of times over already. Okay, so we got probably 5 very thin white onion that I just started preparing. The same basic kind of idea as the poblano pepper, thicker than a quarter, less than a quarter of an inch. And this is also going to straight into my little cup with my poblano and jalapeno pepper. And then let's see, what other cutting things do I need to do? None. So we've got all of our cutting prep stuff done. That's going to clean up my board a little bit here. Got extra stuff hanging out. And then this has probably been just about enough time for our tortilla dough to hydrate. We're going to find out in just a minute. Okay. Onions and peppers are going over on the counter. I have this habit of occasionally, when I'm distracted, forgetting where I put something. So if one of you can, if I ask where my onions and peppers are, one of you remind me that they're on the counter to the right of the stove.
I do that too.
Okay. So.
Micah, I wanted to ask you real quick. Did you happen to mention what kind of oil it is that you use on the chicken when you cook it? Is it just general vegetable oil or olive oil?
In this particular case, it's, yeah, just basic vegetable oil.
Okay.
If I
Olive
wanted
oil work?
to, let's say I wanted to do, we call in the oven, yes. Let's say, for example, I wanted to do a technique called reverse sear, where, where I wanted to sear something. Maybe I'll put, I'm gonna want a very high temperature pan to put a good sear on something first, and then throw it in the oven to finish. In that scenario, I would use a high temperature oil like avocado oil, and olive oil would not work in that case.
Right, olive oil is a lower
Olive oil
temperature oil.
would be
Vegetable
too
oil is a
smoky.
higher temperature oil than olive oil, isn't it?
Yes.
Avocado oil is the best.
Vegetable oil typically is good up to about, avocado and grapeseed oil are both good high temperature oils. They're both good up until about 600 degrees on the pan.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we're gonna do a test tortilla, and I got this suspicion that this is a little underhydrated. So I'm gonna just because I've done this a bunch of times already in my past, we're gonna do a test tortilla, and while that one is going, I'm putting a little bit more water into my masa flour, because I'm pretty sure it's gonna need it. So first step is, and I forgot to cover this, I have a really huge cast iron griddle that fits across 2 burners of my stove. And I had that turned on and started heating before we even clicked record on this call. So this is good and hot. It's not smoking hot, but it is definitely ready to go. You know, fully. This is one of those things where I was talking about before. You think about efficiency of time. If you know that you're going to need this pan to be hot at some point, then turn it on right in the beginning of your cook. Have it ready to go. Now in front of me on my island, I have a tortilla press, and I've got a piece of parchment paper down. I've got a ball of dough that's slightly bigger than a golf ball, currently sitting on the press. And I'm going to squish it just a little bit flat on the press, and I'm going to put a separate piece of parchment paper over the top. And then, to answer your question, Sylvia, how do I get them round? I've got the press shifted down, and I'm about to use the fulcrum to squish, give it a good hard squish. And I pick the press back up. Then the very next step is to take and grab the tortilla away from you on the 2 pieces of paper on the edges away from you, and then flip it toward you, just literally flipping it over. And then you run the press down. And then it gets a little better. And then you take that whole thing and you flip it either left or right, but in the other direction. Flip it upside down again. Run the press again. And then, after those 3 times, your top piece of parchment could easily lay. And then for those who can see it, who's on that can see this? How round is that?
No, can't tell.
That's pretty round.
I can't tell.
It's pretty round.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
It's
so
good.
then we take our, we can flop this onto our already hot cast iron just by holding the paper and literally, I don't know how to explain this, but just flop it and then let the paper go. It'll start sizzling immediately because your pan is preheated. And then we're gonna give that probably about a minute at the temperature that I've got it preheated to before we attempt to take that top piece of paper off, because when I flopped it onto the pan, I left the piece of parchment paper on there. It's not going to catch on fire, so don't worry about that. So when I get ready to take that piece of parchment paper off, if it comes off very easily, that means that that tortilla is doing exactly what it's supposed to. It's cooking through the way that it's supposed to. The moisture is rising up through the tortilla, causing that parchment paper to release. And then once I take the paper off, that also, once it comes off easily, that is also the time when I will flip the tortilla and I'll move it to the back of my giant pan, and then I'll get another tortilla onto the pan. And meanwhile,
That's brilliant. That's so brilliant.
Yes, that is spectacular. I got to go out and get a press. I didn't have one. I don't have one of those.
But I did not know about the parchment paper sliding off the top. That would make you would know it's ready. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of other applications for that process.
Definitely.
I think that's something just figured out through trial and error. I don't know that I was ever taught that anywhere. Okay, so it's been about a minute. So my vision is enough that I can tell that there's something on this dark cast iron pan, but if yours is not, then you can use your use a spatula, and you got to be very quiet. And you can hear when you catch the edge of the paper with the spatula, and then you just touch your hands on the spatula, and my paper perfectly cleanly, because I've done this like a bajillion times. And then, okay, so now my tortilla is on the back of my pan. I'm gonna take my parchment paper, set it back down on the tortilla press, take my golf ball sized bit of dough, put it roughly in the center, squish it, set another piece of parchment paper on the top, close my press, squish. Now I'll do it at full speed.
I'm a little curious. Can you reuse the parchment paper?
That's parchment paper, no wax paper, no butcher paper, nothing like that, because that will.
Right. No, you can't use the wax paper. I know that. But if you use the parchment paper, can you reuse it to make 2 or 3 of these with?
Yes.
Thank you.
I made enough dough to make 4 tortillas, and I'm using 2 pieces of parchment paper, and I have a third one as backup in case one of them gets too saturated. If it gets too wet, it won't release from the product. It won't release properly, and that'll get messy and weird. But I have 3 pieces of parchment paper going at the same time, so that I've got this one tortilla on the back of the pan, one on the front of the pan that still has the parchment paper on it. And then one piece of paper or 2 pieces of paper on my station that I can start prepping my next tortilla.
Regular production line. You're good.
Yeah, I think that's important when you're doing anything like this, like just assembly, and then you preparing everything, getting your mise en place ready, and then just having everything ready to go. Just like you said, it's a production and a process.
You've got excellent organizational skills, and it does take a little organization to cook in the kitchen, whether you're sighted or not.
I feel like it makes it more fun when you're fully prepared to go to war, and it's like so therapeutic. Okay, so this tortilla in the bag is probably ready. I'm going to take them off if I can find it. There it is. Okay, and I'm taking it off the pan, and then I dropped it. Where did it go? There it is. It's okay. So I got it off the pan. I'm putting it onto a plate. Because the last of the cooking is that it's going to steam. So I've got it sitting on a plate, and I just put a light towel over the top of it, and I've got it set aside. And then I can check my one that's on the front, see if the paper is ready to come off. And then it is. Perfectly came off. That means it's ready to flip to the back of the pan. That one felt like it got a little wrinkle.
It bent over.
So we'll finish cooking it that way, but that one's going to end up being that one is gonna end up being crispy tortillas, because it got bent and it broke. But we only need 2 for this recipe, so we've got one of them happened.
Casualties of cooking.
Third chicken time to say.
I like that, but the only way I ever get around one is to buy it in the grocery store, and they're not nearly as good.
So we got about 1 minute, 30 seconds before our chicken is ready to come out of the oven. And if you recall, I said we gotta let it rest, wrapped up tightly in foil, for at least 7 minutes. So I'm gonna be pulling that shortly. And during that time frame, we're gonna a cheese sauce. We're gonna get ready to sear the vegetables as well.
So when you take the chicken out of the oven on the cookie sheet, it's already on the aluminum foil, and all that you do is with a pair of gloves or something, you wrap it around tightly around the breast and leave it set for 7 minutes or more.
That oil is that foil is so thin. I've never gotten burnt by it just by grabbing the foil. I just grab the foil and wrap it up, and I'm gonna set the cookie sheet just kind of off to the side of my kitchen here. It's kind of out of the way. So I've never had any issues getting burnt by the aluminum foil.
I admit I have never been burnt by aluminum foil that way, but I have been burnt by touching the pan or the chicken sometimes. Well,
And so I think, Alan, you bring up a good point for those who are maybe a little more nervous about, a little more cautious. Using those gloves, those hot gloves would be really a good thing to do.
Yeah, so for taking the pan out of the oven, my timer just went off. For taking the pan out of the oven, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I have a hot glove here, apron that my son got me for my birthday. Glove matches the apron. And I'm just using the front of my kitchen sink to set this chicken on. Is that visible to those who can see on the video?
No, it's
Or not?
not.
That's it. Renee or Sylvia?
No,
It is not.
No, it's not. No.
That's okay. I thought about that before I started this. And I have handy plate, just so people can see what I've done.
and as you're getting that, I'm gonna just say that you brought up such an important thing, because as we mentioned, knowing when chicken is done is so important. And you're talking about using the right temperature and the right amount of time. Knowing that really helps ensure you got chicken that is fully cooked.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay.
Do you know approximately how large that breast was?
These are the modern day chicken breasts in the store are just obnoxious. Like our usual amount of protein I may have in a meal should be about 4 ounces or so, 4 or 5 ounces. And I think that chicken breast came in at 13. So it's
Oh
almost a
my
pound.
goodness.
Holy.
That's
cow.
3 meals then.
Yeah, it's almost a pound just by itself.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's just not,
Okay, that large of a breast, how long did you leave that cook in your oven at 350?
28 minutes.
28 minutes?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Plus the 7, he's gonna steam it in the foil, which is a great idea.
Right, and
Yep.
that's of course knowing how accurate your oven is
Wait.
too.
Micah, am I right? Did you say 7 minutes?
Yes, at least 7 minutes. And the point of the oven accuracy is a good one. And that's the reason for letting it preheat for such a long time, to be sure that there aren't any cold spots in the oven. And then also with the pizza stone in there, it just goes a long way, because most ovens are probably not completely accurate unless it's a commercial one. They're probably a little bit off. And they don't well, maybe they do make a digital one now that will hook up to an iPhone. or Android or something. I don't know. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I
know that-
haven't found one. I haven't found an oven thermometer that does hook up. That's a smart one. I would love one myself.
my grill thermometer will go up to, I think, 370 degrees, but that's a probe thermometer. It doesn't measure ambient temperature. So
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the oven thermometers worked a little different, which is it. Like I said, it's difficult for us if we can't really see the output of the digital.
It's nice to have one that talks to you. I used to have one of
Mhm.
those probe thermometers that was a talking thermometer. In fact, I think I got it as a product benefit from one of our early shows, if I remember right.
I love using the probe thermometer, the food thermometers for internal, temperature of food like chicken.
Yes.
But as far as the internal temperature of a stove, it's tricky.
I have one of those oven thermometers you set in there, but the
Yes.
problem is that I can't get up close enough to see it, to
Exactly.
know
That's
what
the
it
problem.
says. However, I have a neighbor who's sighted.
Okay, so the next thing I'm doing is we're getting ready to do this cheese sauce. This is very sciencey cheese sauce. Tongue in cheek. This is quite literally. So I'm going to be using something called sodium citrate to create this cheese sauce. Sodium
Oh.
that makes
Sodium citrate.
so velvety and American cheese so silky. But I'm going to be using a hard cheese. I'm using some Vermont seriously sharp cheddar cheese, and I'm going to make it just as smooth as Velveeta without it breaking or separating while I make it. Which, if you've ever tried to make a cheese sauce, that can be it.
And where do you get the sodium? Did you say sodium citrate?
Yep, sodium citrate. I got mine from Amazon, but they
Yeah.
Whole Foods it too.
Is it sold under some commercial name other than sodium citrate?
I don't know. I just typed in sodium citrate and got what I wanted.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you how you learned about that for making creamy cheese sauce.
Boredom, watching YouTube.
Or the YouTube. Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so I'm going to turn on my digital scale. I'm ready. Okay, she's ready. 202 grams. Now I know that this carafe that came with the digital scale weighs 164 grams. So that's 38 grams worth of cheese that I just measured out. And in order to do this cheese sauce stuff, right now, while I'm talking, I'm taking tortillas off of the pan. So for this cheese sauce stuff, we need to do our amounts of cheese by weight in grams, which was 38 grams. And we're going to add to that half of that in liquid, which, whatever that would be, 18 grams of liquid, which I'm going to use some half and half to get that. So let's start that over. I'm ready. Okay. A little bit more. 23 grams. Oops. Oh well. That's a huge problem when working in such small amounts. 23 grams is 5 grams over. So then, next part of this sciencey cheese sauce, we take those two amounts. In this case, it's 23 grams and 38 grams. So whatever that comes up to, 61 grams. We're going to take 2% of that in sodium citrate, which 2% is going to be not very much at all. So I'm not even going to try to weigh that out. I don't think my scales. So I'm literally just going to do kind of a heavy pinch. I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
If
I
you want
was
to,
just gonna say the same. So 2 ounces, if you found it on Amazon, 2 ounces will stretch a good amount.
so I'm doing just a pinch of this sodium citrate in here, and I would call it maybe like an eighth of a teaspoon. Like if you really felt like you wanted to try to measure instead of weigh it. That's another thing that I wish was available to us, a talking jeweler's scale, because sometimes I want to measure things in much smaller amounts than grams for cooking, and not a talking one of those. Anyway. Okay, so I just put my cream in my little saucepan, my sodium citrate in the little saucepan, and then this cheese also going in the little saucepan that I've got on the back burner of my stove. And my last tortilla ready to come off. So I'm going to put him down to steam with the rest of them on this plate on my counter. And then I'm going to take the front burner of this giant cast iron. I'm going to crank up the heat on that because we're about to sear some vegetables. Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn you off. She just said goodbye.
You have a gas stove, is that correct?
I do not.
Electric?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So right now I've got some gentle heat on the back burner with this tiny saucepan with my sciencey cheese sauce. I'm just gonna stir to mix everything together and start heating, and it will, what happens is instead of it staying clumpy and maybe even going kind of grainy as cheese sauces sometimes do when you just use cream and cheese, the sodium citrate makes it emulsify into something that's perfectly smooth. So my front burner on my pan is hot. Not quite hot
So
enough.
Micah, are there other things you can make, use like with that sodium citrate to make more smooth sauces? Or have you tried other things besides the cheese sauce?
So it's used in lots of different things. You can use it as like if you're trying to make your own soda, for example, maybe like, I don't know, maybe you're trying to carbonate a fresh blueberry soda. Instead of using citric acid to try to give it that sour element, if you use sodium citrate, it's going to cause the carbonic acid from your fermentation gas to mix in with the liquid much more easily and readily. It won't get super foamy when you try to pour it. That's another type of emulsification.
Alan, did you know we were getting a science lesson today too?
This is going beyond me.
I'm loving it. I'm really loving it.
This is what I was telling Renee the other day, that I'm a very science-based and very organized cook, and that's therapeutic for me. She was saying relax, relax, and this is relaxing to me. I love it.
You have to read the book Lessons in Chemistry. It's all about a cook who used chemistry to teach cooking.
That's cool.
I believe it. I'll give it a go. Give it a read. Okay. This sauce, I know you probably can't see it, and even if I tried to move the pan, I'd run the risk of dumping it on the floor, but it is like going, I'm stirring it with a wooden spoon, and I can't feel any little clumps at all. It's like perfectly velvety smooth. I love it. Okay.
And I totally get what you're saying, because I've made that before, and it's kind of a stringy thing when you use cheddar. There's, yeah.
Yes, it likes to separate.
And
I've
this,
never tried to do that.
no, I just remembered. I asked you guys to tell me where my vegetables were, and then I remembered. They're on the.
Okay. Right of the
Yes.
stove.
We got vegetables going on to sear. That's the ones we cut it before. They're 2 different kinds of peppers and onion. And then another cooking tip, I guess, for everybody. I put these on the front of the pan. I dump them out of a little cup, and now I'm kind of just spreading them around some so that they're staying in kind of a flat layer. The one thing I didn't think to mention before is, but it just kind of happens naturally for me when I cook, is to salt every layer. This one I haven't salted. I'm gonna do it now, and I'm using Sylvia's idea. I'm kind of using my other hand to negotiate how much salt is coming out of my shaker thing and where it's going. So I've got I'm shaking my shaker, and I've got my left hand under where the salt comes out and letting the salt run down over my fingers so I can feel it.
That's how I salt everything. That's a great tip.
Yep, salt every layer. It doesn't take a lot. It just needs some for every layer.
Mhm. Bring out the flavors.
Yep. We are getting close to the home stretch here. While those vegetables are going, y'all reckon it's been 7 minutes? Let's see. Oh yeah, it's been 7 minutes. Okay. So now I've got this piece of chicken. I've got it sitting on like a kid's plate in this piece of foil. And the reason that I do that is that when I go to cut it, there's going to be a lot of liquid in this foil, but also some liquid when I go to cut the chicken itself. You know what? I'm just going to take this chicken liquid. I'm just going to pour it right on
Mhm.
this.
Yes.
Wait. So I poured my chicken liquid out of that foil onto the vegetables because that's just me, as Chef John would say on YouTube. That's just you cooking. Okay.
That's awesome. That's a great idea too.
Yeah.
And now I've got the chicken on this kid's plate because the kid's plate is plastic. It was like $1 for 2 of them. It doesn't matter if I cut it up with my knife, if I put slices in it. And it's got a lip on it so that when I cut the chicken, any liquid that comes out is not going to be, it's not going to be just running all over a cutting board somewhere. It's kind of like using a cutting board with the groove in it, but you know, this was $1 and those are way more than $1.
Yeah, I have one with a groove in it. It was expensive.
And so now I'm cutting 1/2 inch wide stripes in this. Strips, sorry. I mean, they are stripes, but I meant to say strips.
How do you know whether you're cutting with the grain or against the grain?
That's a good one. With a chicken breast, that's super easy because the chicken breast is kind of very loosely a teardrop shape, and the grain goes along the length of that teardrop. But let's say with a chicken thigh, that's way more difficult to figure out. And it actually took me having to learn how to debone a chicken thigh before I could figure it out just by picking up one that was already deboned. It's that's maybe a different video to explain how to figure that out.
Different show.
Okay.
Yeah, Chef Micah, I'm really appreciating your descriptive detail.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing a fabulous job.
So now I'm taking my strips and I've put them all in a stack, and I'm just running my knife down through the stack. And so I'm kind of making these like batons, and this chicken is so juicy right now.
Stop. You're going to make us hungry.
Already there.
I'll cut a little more. Size of the strips, whatever is kind of up to you, totally your preference. I'm making them 1/2 inch. Some of them are strips, some of them are more like I said, batons. But it's not important as long as you're going to be fine with eating it. If you're serving it out for someone else, you know, maybe take a little more consideration into how detailed you are about cutting your chicken. But I'm not serving out to anyone else. So, the hand rinse.
I love those tips on the chicken. I'm going to try that with a little aluminum foil. Now, in the past, I've cooked chicken at 375 rather than 350, although I know a lot of people that do cook it at 350. The advantage being that it keeps it moister when you cook it at a lower temperature.
25 degrees isn't going to make a significant difference, I don't think.
Yeah, okay.
That's just my opinion. I don't think it will.
You also
It
have
does
to learn
sometimes when
your,
you're baking things.
you have to learn your oven too, because some ovens cook a little high, some cook a little low. You have to learn your oven too.
You're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
You know, and I'm pretty acquainted with this oven, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable working at 350. Now, got off. All my burners are off. I got this little handy dandy taco shell holder, mabob.
Yep.
Either.
It's like a little metal.
Yeah, it holds it in the right
Holder.
shape. Gotcha, yeah.
Yes.
He's all fancy, isn't he?
I tell you what, a lot of nice toys. I like that tortilla press.
Yeah, the tortilla press is super cool because it's literally only it might have been $25. I don't think it was even that much.
Well, my idea would be to lay the thing on the on my granite countertop and press it with, gee, I don't know what, a dinner plate, bottom of a dinner plate.
So
I don't think
that's
it's gonna be hard enough.
I thought
Might
about
not be, yeah.
I thought about introducing it that way too, these taco things, because I didn't always have a tortilla press. And I used to use this dictionary from 1953. that's thick. So I used to use that with some parchment paper and a piece of foil against the dictionary in case the liquid from the seeped through the parchment paper. I didn't want to like mess up the dictionary. So
And
what
I
I'm
had a friend who would take the ball of dough, and she would just do it in her hands
Mhm.
like this, and it would be coming out perfectly round when she was done, just with her hands.
Oh, I believe it.
Years of practice.
Mhm.
I've got 2 tortillas loaded into my metal doodad. I'm gonna
Mhm.
a little bit of this chicken. I'm literally just picking it up with my hands. If you want to be super picky sanitary, cooking for somebody else to do it with a spoon. I'm dropping these pieces of chicken over into my cheese sauce. I've got just about enough to fill these 2 tortillas. I'm gonna give it a stir. And see, this is an interesting thing that's happened here. Where's my little pot holder thing? So I didn't really look at any of the information on the cheese itself to see about the fat contents of the cheese. And so the amount of sodium citrate that I chose, that little pinch, ended up making this, while it's velvet smooth, it got really thick, really fat, which is nothing wrong. It's just another thing that, you know, if you're going to try to cook with science.
Is there any way you can thin that out at this point, or is that going to have to be the consistency?
Have I thought to check it before I just dump the chicken in? There would be, just by adding some liquid, milk or half and half or something. But I didn't think to do. Okay.
Well, this way you won't have runny sauce when you put it in the tortillas.
I kind of like it thicker, I
I'm
think.
sure it's still going to be delicious.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm thinking. I actually think I would prefer it thicker.
Yeah.
That's
Because
correct.
that sauce is gonna stick really well to that chicken.
Right.
Exactly. That's a great point that, these tacos aren't gonna have like taco diarrhea. They're gonna come out good.
Where it runs at the end, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. A little too chicken in that one. And doing this with your fingers is, I don't know how, honestly, I'm not sure, some of these things I'm not sure I could do with a spoon. Like, I need to use my fingers to get some of these things done. So you're just gonna have messy.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. I used to always have to use food safe gloves when I was doing that, when I was making things for other people, because I wanted to use my hands.
Exactly.
Well, I know that real chefs also use their hands, even the
Mhm.
ones who can see.
Yes.
I've
sure.
heard that from many.
Wash them frequently.
Yes, we had
Mhm.
to all the time.
Okay, so the very last step is I'm taking some of this cabbage slaw that I made, and I'm putting it a little bit, actually kind of a lot of it on each of these two potatoes.
So you put the cheese covered chicken and now you're putting the salad.
Yep, I put the seared vegetables down first,
Oh, you did? Oh, the seared vegetables went before the chicken. Okay.
and then the cheesy chicken,
Mm-hmm.
the vegetable stuff, the slaw stuff that I made.
Yeah.
These are done. I don't know, these,
Oh my gosh. Oh,
They look
delicious.
amazing.
Renee, where's our smell-o-vision?
Mm.
Still in the works.
Micah, that sounds so delicious. And I love how like informative you were. And I love the science behind it. Love it.
I agree with you.
so, but the big question is, did I get it right? Let's see if they taste it.
You tell us.
Hopefully they're not too hot. Mhm.
Now, I'm not a real big fan of coleslaw, although of cabbage, but I do like coleslaw and I do like sauerkraut because they don't
Oh.
taste like cabbage. How about this stuff? Does it still taste like cabbage?
No, in fact,
Good, then I'll try it.
Sylvia and Alex-
How's it taste, Micah?
oh, it's terrific.
It is. Mm,
So behind me
okay.
on the counter is a batch of sauerkraut that I started the day before yesterday. Because sauerkraut's one of my favorite things.
Sauerkraut takes time to age properly.
Mm,
Well, I tell you what, that all sounded so delicious. I might have to book a flight on over and come to dinner. I don't know.
I'll wait till the summertime when it warms up.
True.
Maybe next-
Thank you so much, Micah, for making that and sharing that with us.
Thank you for sharing, Micah.
Maybe next-
Excuse me.
I'll come cook.
Micah, if someone wanted to contact you, how would they go about connecting with you?
So just my name is my email. So micah.ranquist@gmail.com. So that's MICAHRANQUIST@gmail. And then the only social media I do is Facebook, and you find me by that same name on Facebook.
Well, thank you very much, Micah and Sylvia. It was great working with you guys today. And thank all of you in our audience for joining us on Cooking Without Looking TV show Winter Edition 2023. If you'd like today's recipe, as well as past recipes, please go to our website at www.cookingwithoutlooking.com. cooking.wordpress.com.
And to
Sylvia?
see past shows and this show, you can visit the Cooking Without Looking YouTube channel.
And if you teach people who are blind, partially sighted, visually impaired, or even sighted people, please feel free to use our show for your students. There is no charge for using them. And many teachers around the country and more than 60 countries around the world now use our Cooking Without Looking TV show to teach their students.
And definitely check out the Cooking Without Looking podcast, which you can find on Spotify, iHeart Radio, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And it's also available on all Alexa-enabled devices.
Yes, it is. And if you would like to donate to Vision World Foundation to help us change the way we see blindness, please go to our website at www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com and click on the link at the top of the page. And for more information, you can call Renee, our producer, at 305-200-9104. Sylvia?
Look for our next show, Cooking Without Looking, in March. I'm Sylvia Stinson Perez, and on behalf of Alan Preston and the Cooking Without Looking team,
And Vision World Foundation.
and Vision World Foundation, thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing me to be a guest.
Oh, great working with
Thank you
guys.
to everyone who was watching. Thank you, guys. You were great.
That was great. I'm off to Costco to get some chicken breast.
Sounds good. Email me.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
That
Melissa.
was
Bye.
amazing.
Thanks, Micah.
Thank you.
Thanks.